lecture series 21-22, and I would like to welcome Architect Mahesh Wagdere, Architect Mansi Sahu. It's Sarfaraz there, architect.
Sarfaraz couldn't join us, but he's there in spirit today.
Okay.
He's running around.
Yes. So I would like to welcome you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ajita. I think thank you for reaching out to us. We always like to connect with students and other academicians because it's so important to have this conversation and exchange projects and exchange doubts and questions. So I think that premise for us was very nice. So thank you for inviting us. And yeah, it's lovely to see everyone. I can still see a lot of non-cameras. So Nitish Bane, come on, Aira Kumari, Rahul.
I'm very good at calling out, so you guys can't hide out.
Like literally, look at me. I've literally been running around, and I just so you cannot look worse than me. So you have to switch on your cameras. I can see Surbhi Mathur, Rupali Vaidya, Ankit Murthy, and Sushmita. Faisal.
Video.
And maybe what we'll do is just share our screen. Mahesh, you you want to give a brief about what we're presenting today?
Yes. So
I would like to just say that Rupali will introduce you so that, and then you may start.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll just quickly, she will briefly introduce you. Hi. Hi, Mansi. Hi, Mahesh.
Hello.
Hi, Rupali.
Hi. Okay, so we can start, right, Ajita? Yeah. Okay. Good morning, all. It is my pleasure to introduce our eminent speakers for today. We have with us today Architect Mahesh Wagdere, who's having a master's degree in urban design from the University of California, Berkeley, and bachelor's from College of Architecture, Mumbai. Also, Architect Mansi Sahu. She has a Master of Science in Architecture and Urban Design from Columbia University in New York and bachelor's from the University of Mumbai. The co-founder, one more co-founder from StudioPOD, Architect Sarfaraz Momin. He is not there in the meet today, right, Mansi?
No, he's not there.
Okay.
He joined, but right now he's not there.
Okay. So he has a master's degree in urban design from the University of Michigan and a bachelor's degree from Sir J.J. College of Architecture.
Just excuse me, Sonal Kundale, please mute yourself. Sonal Kundale, please mute yourself.
Okay, she is muted.
Okay. Can I continue? Done, no?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Okay, so together they are co-founders of the renowned architecture firm StudioPOD. StudioPOD is an international multidisciplinary firm which specializes in city planning, urban design, landscape urbanism, and transport planning, based in Mumbai and recently incorporated in the United States also. Some of their projects over the last few years include detailed master plans in Abu Dhabi, sustainable development toolkits in Puri, stream rejuvenation in Naya Raipur, tourism master plans in Andhra Pradesh and Maharashtra, and detailed streetscape design in Mumbai, Pune, and Thane. They're also working with several private developers like Godrej, Mahindra, and Blackstone for master planning, landscape urbanism, and implementation projects in multiple regions across India. So in all their projects they have worked on, they have tried to push the conventional design boundaries and employ state-of-the-art design ideas and the principles. So over to you, StudioPOD. I think you like to be known as StudioPOD.
Yeah.
Yes.
So POD stands for People Oriented Design. And that's something that has connected Sarfaraz, Mahesh, and me. When we decided to start a firm, we discussed that, even though we are architects, we will always think of the POD aspect first, and that's where the name has actually come from. So yeah, Mahesh, you want to just discuss about what we are presenting today? And
Yeah. So thanks everyone again. So what we're presenting today is a snippet of some of our work. So I know that the third year studio is primarily focused this time on the on designing of public spaces and people-oriented spaces. That's something which is very close to our heart. And if you'll see most of the works that we do, whatever scale it might be large scale planning to kind of small implementation of smaller spaces. That's always a core of our belief, our ethos, and also kind of reflects in the work methodology that we will show today. What we're doing is we have broken the presentation in a way that some things can be understood at a larger scale. And I know that there's a larger group of students from other batches also, other fourth year, fifth year as well. So it will be good to kind of just tease out a little larger context as well. Some of you will go into your thesis projects too. So whatever the scale of the project is, it's always good to kind of zoom out and look at the larger context and see how different analytical situations can lead to a particular solution in the design. So I'll just share my screen and we can walk through some of the slides that I'll show. Mansi, you wanted to tease out some questions in the beginning, or you should just get started?
Yeah, so I think one thing we discussed with Ajita was that you were saying that you do have some questions. So I think we'd like to start with that. Anybody from the studio, if you have any specific questions that you are thinking about or that you are struggling with when you are now starting to zoom out and look at the urban scale, we just like to start with the questions, and then what we'll do is as we present, we'll also try to address some of those, and then we'll come back to the questions in the end. So yeah, over to you guys. Any questions do you have? Because without question, if it's not an interactive session, guys, it will not be helpful. We'll give you a lot of gyan and go, and it will not come in handy when you do design or anything else. So please ask questions.
You can also type in in the chat box and just keep it. We'll wait for a couple of minutes. We have some kind of a briefing to begin with. It can be any generic question. Doesn't need to be.
Yeah, it can be about
it doesn't need to be very specific, but can be very generic at this point.
So does anybody have any question from the studio? I can see a lot of faces there. You can come over to the mic and ask. I can't actually hear anything from the studios. Are they saying something? If you guys can't use the mic, do one thing. One of you just log on to the Zoom so that then that phone can be passed around and everyone can ask questions through that.
So I wanted to ask, while designing, a site is near the lakefront or any public space, it is designed for a long run. So how do such designs can be easily maintained? How do we look at the maintenance factors?
Okay. All right. That's a good question. We'll keep that. Any other questions?
Should we ask students to write questions in chat box? That is also, is that okay? So
yeah, I mean,
yeah,
that's also fine. But if you have any specific one right now, just put up your hand. And, you know, if you guys want to do architecture and urban designing, you have to open up and be a little more like brave. So it's okay. You can ask questions. It's okay. We will not judge the kind of question. Just ask any question. That's fine. I can see the second year studio also there. Anybody
Hello.
from the second year? Yeah, tell me.
I had a doubt. How to actually tackle like the site if we want to deal with the open spaces and design for flexible and multi-purpose space on the site.
Okay, good question. Anyone else? Anyone from the second year studio?
Okay, I think Mansi,
Okay.
let's give time for people to, if they have any questions, think also
Yeah,
just
so-
type in the chat box.
Yeah, guys, just start please putting the typing the questions in the chat box, and we'll just show you some of our projects now. Yeah, Mahesh, go ahead.
Okay, cool. So, can you see my screen, everybody? It's visible, right, Mansi? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So, it's full screen. So we generally, when we start our presentations, this is one of the examples we like to lead with. This is not in India. This is basically two projects in two different places in South America. One is Medellin, Colombia, and the other one is Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. So the thing about Medellin, Colombia, if you guys have seen Narcos also on Netflix, you'll know a little bit of history. Medellin was basically the murder capital of the world back in 1990s, early 90s, and it was actually voted as the world's most innovative city in 2012. And there was a way it actually went through the whole process. And what really changed in Medellin was this very good leadership that came in. The mayor, Sergio Ferrado, he actually, when he took over, apart from all his emotive actions, he really kind of delved into what are the real issues. So the kind of questions that were asked in the beginning itself by the leadership, what do we want to resolve for, what are the vulnerable populations and territories in this place where such a crime is happening, what are the youth of the place doing when they're engaging in these criminal activities, what is the lack of other things that they could be provided with, whether it's education, healthcare, recreation, accessibility in terms of how do you reach these places, and overall the culture of the place itself. And what really he did was he implemented and invested in places. These are like big slums in Medellin, which essentially had almost negligible infrastructure. These streets were given for more transformation, where you can see places for walking, more organized kind of areas. Accessibility, which was a key. These slums were like located in the hills and very difficult to reach. So really introducing state-of-the-art technology with escalators and providing a very good infrastructure to reach these places as well. A cable car system was installed, which actually kind of really made accessibility simpler from the main city area in the foothills to come to these areas. And also kind of quality public spaces, which could be used by all the people over there very effectively, and social amenities like libraries and all these things, which were like very state of the art, not kind of doing any discrimination that these are like poor people, we don't need access to good amenities, but really going beyond and providing very good amenities, infrastructure, accessibility to this area. So looking at this, and Medellin is supposed to be a very good example of how the transformation has happened. So what Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, there's a big favela slums over there as well. They decided that let's copy paste what happened here, right? So they got the cable cars, which was a huge kind of a big visible item, right, which was there in that list, and they really got it, but it really didn't work. What happened was in Brazil, people were saying that we need like infrastructure in sewers, we need schools, we don't need something just for tourism, for people to come to our areas. We need things which are much more easy to access. And what happened was the crime rates and everything in Rio was still there below the gondolas. But still there were some positive things that people in Rio, the locals over there themselves came up with this whole public art thing, not a major transformation in terms of upgradation in infrastructure, but something that they could really make it their own and cheer, right? So something which was small wins. So the idea was that a copy-paste solution won't really work in any place, right? You really have to contextualize what are the real problems are. One of the very famous dialogue from Einstein, or quotes from Einstein, is that if you really need to solve a problem, come with a solution, you need to ask the right questions. And if you don't ask the right questions, whatever solutions will come, they will not adhere to what the problem solving is, right? So you have to at least spend 70 to 80% of the time asking the right questions when you're actually coming up with all these solutions for these places. And for us, when we started the practice in 2013, we were mainly focused in urban design. Architecture was not something that we immediately went on to, because our core forte was urban design and planning. And what we were really kind of questioning was to what are the relevant Indian solutions for all these issues that we see in India, right? Like whatever problems that we face in our Indian cities, ecologically, transformation, how do you bring about change, and how do you tackle urban design and design problems. So that's how our firm that we started. It's a very people-first approach that we take, and it can be seen in every kind of aspect of the projects that we work on. We have a very kind of a vibrant studio of like 20 plus people, young architects to urban designers, planners, transportation planners, all kind of these titles of disciplines. But at the same time, we have people who with their own perspective and attitudes, whether their hobbies are, they all get translated into the work somehow or the other. A rail enthusiast or a cyclist will make sure that we talk about transit very, very carefully in our projects as well. So that's the way we have been working throughout all these years. And obviously it comes with a lot of kind of pain through all this pandemic time. We've still been able to connect and keep going, right? So what we wanted to talk about and narrate some of the projects that we have worked on was, we'll go through one by one through each of these, especially when you're looking at, it doesn't need to be a very big scale, but any project that we look at, you always have to zoom out a little bit. It's not that you've got a plot, especially in studios. Let's say if you have got a design problem and a design site has been demarcated, it doesn't mean that that's the end of it. You really need to step out and see the larger scale, the edge conditions to the larger ecology of the place, to look at the integrated approach, and then zoom in again on the side of what we need to do. And I will go through each of them quickly and talk about it. Zooming out, just quickly giving an example. If this was when we were working on some project in southern India, we were looking at the water systems there, and a small little canal was what our site was. But when we actually looked at the larger system, this is the Eastern Ghats in towards the Bay of Bengal. There are all these cascading tanks, which are almost more than 3 lakh tanks. Some of them are dated like 3rd century BC, like thousands of years. These tanks have been there. And what really is interesting is all these tanks are connected to the perennial rivers flowing to the Bay of Bengal. And back in the days, each like village in the local area were managing these 2 or 3 lakes before it went down to the river system and then to the Bay of Bengal itself. So all of this is about a connected system of tanks going towards the river and the Bay of Bengal. But over time, when development happened, so a lot of these kind of blocked out the floodplains, and you know what the effects are that happens with these when the tanks and the systems have been kind of abused, right? Chennai floods is a big example. When a big flood happened last year as well, crores of loss of money as well as human deaths. At the same time, the same city in 2019 was called Day Zero. Day Zero is basically when it's a very nightmare kind of situation for a city where all the water dries out. So same city which flooded so much in a couple of years is in the extreme situation of drought. And how do you kind of react to these situations? Another example in the northern India, this is the Gurgaon NCR region, where we actually have, this is a NASA image, where the groundwater resource is depleting at a rapid rate of almost a meter every year. And this is the epicenter is the NCR region. And then obviously with the whole supply system of providing water through tanks and these, right? So when you have such separate contexts that we are looking at of water, how do we deal with a larger scale? This is something in Rajasthan when we are working on a couple of master planning for a couple of village tourism development plan for the Devasthan department of Rajasthan. We were looking at the overall development of the village in the next 20 years. But when we looked at those, we just kind of zoomed out at the larger region. So the ecology of Rajasthan is that there's a whole Aravalli range in the center, where from the western side, the Great Indian Desert is all desert environment. But on the other side of the ranges is all kind of a good area where kind of rainfalls also happen, right? So the East Aravalli region is quite different to the West Aravalli region. There's a whole biodiversity and which happens in the Aravalli ranges, and the rain shadow region on the other side. So these two villages that we were looking at, Seventri and Gadbhor in Rajasthan, had a whole system of low-lying areas where the water used to come down from this Aravalli range on the left-hand side. And they formed a whole system around the village. The temple is in the center of the village, a little bit of road network. But when we looked at the larger expansion plan of the village itself, we basically identified with all the network of the hydrology itself, which are the areas which should be left floodable when the floods happen, or whether when the water comes. And then the rest will be the main kind of areas where development could happen, the reds over here. Identifying the land suitable for development, and then identifying the other places as greens where these plains were happening, the low-lying areas were. And then that's how the entire structure was changed. The road network, everything was much more consolidated in terms of the development itself around the center of the village, and then keeping expansions only in these fingers around the fingers itself where the greens were located. And then talking about mixed use, easy to walk, easier walkable distances, replicating the village environment which was there in these smaller development areas which are there around. So the existing view of the village with the Devasthan, the temple, the center, kind of how the expansion of the public spaces happen in those low-lying areas. Transits get integrated so into the entire thing where the bus depot is located, and then you can easily walk to the temple once you come to the bus station, and the other modes of transit as well. So the idea was to kind of, there's a lot more layers in these which we're not showing. We're just showing one aspect of zooming out in this, but it really helped coming up with a vision plan for the entire village area in the next 20 years. So that was a large scale intervention of when you look at larger scale, how it happened and zoom out. The second one is zoom in. We talk about integrating ecology and habitat. So this is another site that we are looking at in Pune. This is a riverfront development in a large township in Mahalunge near Pune, where we essentially were brought in along with the master planners at that time as landscape urbanists to look at the larger scale systems of landscape as well as the build form. And what we came up with was the whole story of how the site was actually bridging between the riverfront on the left hand side, and there was this tekri, which is, if somebody from Pune, you can understand the meaning of tekris are basically small hillocks all over Pune. People are very, very interested in trekking and kind of outdoor activities, Punekar especially. So the idea of tekri is very, very much contextual in the place in Pune. But the point was that the site is very strategically kind of placed between a riverfront of over here and then the tekri on one side, and you create an easy walk from one place to the other to come down to the waterfront itself. It has a very iconic bridge on one side which connects the two parts of Mahalungi to Hinjewadi. So that's how the concept evolved. The idea was to kind of have the overall landscape connect between these two places, keeping the public realm very, very simple. But we created nature of movements through a whole retail street on one side between the two built environments and public edges, coming down to a pedestrian street with open space on one side and retail on one side, and then going to the waterfront, riverfront on the left. And the idea was, when we started this, we first got like a biodiversity expert on board, and got the whole thing kind of analyzed for different kind of bird species, shrubs, plant species, and actually kind of documented the whole thing to understand what the ecology of the place was. And this helped us to actually come about more and understand about the different plant species which are there, and really enhance them. Mansi, you want to add?
So, yeah, I think here what we did was there were 500 plus trees on site, and what we just did was started identifying what do those trees do, what are the kind of migratory birds that come there, do those trees flower, are they fruiting trees, are they okay with the flooding, because the river also has flooding tides and receding tides depending on the kind of climate that time of the year. So we just started documenting all of these and segregating them in shrubs as well as trees. And the data that you see down is a way of, for us, that was a way to represent which trees are nesting trees, which one are the fruit one, which have a medicinal quality, which one are rare. And then we also documented a lot of the trees that are actually invasive species that actually need to be removed if you are doing any sort of intervention here. So why this was important? This was important because I think one person asked about the edge conditions of waterfronts and in respect to the site. So this is very important because we were trying to analyze not just the users that are coming here as humans, but also the users getting the birds the same importance or any kind of biodiversity. We also did a fish mapping to understand what kind of is it, do people fish there, and what can we do to make sure that even when development comes, we don't really get this off balance. So yeah, Mahesh, you can go next. And then we had collaborated with Enviroscape, which is a landscape consultancy firm. We had then we created these pallets that were actually used in the planting of anything that we propose on the site, so that we do not get other species that are not native to this context here. Yeah, go next. Yeah, so this is just a map that indicates that we were trying to understand the entire habitat of the space, and not just the different things, like just how people use it and what is the development. Sometimes there are clues about biodiversity, and the same thing in the previous case that we had presented also, where we actually traced how the water is flowing on site, how does it actually stop, where does it stop, does it flood, does it not flood. So that really helps us understand how do you approach the design if you get all these contexts as data sets that you can use. Can you go next? Yeah, you want to talk about this, Mahesh?
Yeah, so this is basically the edge of the riverfront. Whatever we were talking about, the mapping of the whole biodiversity. At the same time, the entire water's edge actually dropped down towards the riverfront itself. So what we did was we maintained a lot of the plant species and trees which were there, and created what we call a floodable landscape. So in the peak, when actually the entire monsoons, the river floods, and the top level, if you see my cursor, the top dotted line is where the water floods still. So the idea is that whatever materials we select, whether the paved area, the decks, and the landscape would all flood in that time when the river floods. But in the other times when the river is the rest of the year, you can actually access these as a very natural, rustic kind of public space, a walk along the riverfront itself, and maintain that kind of authenticity of the river itself. This again comes back to how that entire analysis really helped, and we really achieved different edge conditions throughout the entire riverfront, where we made sure that we can actually introduce things like smaller porous stilts below the walk, where fish could breed easily, a little bit of ways of different kind of species of the rhinoceros beetles and everything else can easily come in, and the different biodiversity elements can really survive. Artificial reefs on the edge of the waterfront, the natural boulders which are there throughout the site, again reusing them and repurposing them. That's what the idea is, to not only talk about when you talk about ourselves in an environment. It's not only people, right? It's about different animals, bird species, fishes. Everything is part of the larger ecosystem that really helps the circular loop throughout itself. And at the same time, when the edge condition is happening and trying to keep the whole biodiversity in place, we also check with the kind of spaces which are being created. At the end of the day, this is like a private developer looking at a township. So creating different volumes of public spaces, the public and private nature of how these public parks will be engaged was carefully looked at. Creating rooms of programmed spaces throughout within these forested trees environments to ensure that you have programmable space as well. At the same time, a lot of trees and a lot of biodiversity as well. So that was that. We have some pictures at the end will show of that implementation of these projects as well. The other thing is, a lot of the time when we start a project, especially at large scale, and I'm sure you'll be having the same thing when you start any kind of design exercise for a site as well, where there is lack of data, and that happens a lot in our actual projects when you do as well. What happens is people have data, but we don't have easy access to data. I don't know if anybody uses GIS in the college, but GIS is something where you actually document all the layers at a large scale, and everything is documented on a platform that's geographic information system. So a lot of the cities actually document these, but nobody knows how to use them, and they are sitting in the lockers in the government department. So accessing this data is very crucial and critical, but sometimes there's lack of that, right? And how do we proceed ahead when there's no data available, and how do we kind of gather those, right? So there are some places where we get them, some places we don't. This is a project in Thane, which we did a whole complete streets project with the Smart Cities initiative, and working with CRISIL was leading this. And we were brought on as an urban design expert. So what we did was, there was a whole traffic analysis and count which was done for the entire station area. This is the Thane west side, where under the Satis, and then the entire network of streets of how much of we call it modal split of how much people use the private vehicles, how much use interim mode of transport like buses, rickshaws, and everything. How much people are coming by bus and then walking itself. And what we did was this is like outside the station directly, and there was this entire kind of huge area where people come out from the station and directly are thrown into this walking area, where if you see the footpath is actually 1.8 meters. This was the mandate that was shared, that the minimum footpath space should be 1.8 back in the days, but a lot of contractors went down and took that as a dimension to be given everywhere, not kind of actually looking at the demand of how many people are walking and busy areas as well. So when you look at this, the 70% of the commuters are actually coming out walking, and less than 30% are actually 30% of the commuters are actually taking the skywalk. So a lot of people are still taking coming out on the lower level and walking onto the street itself. But as you see, more than 50% of the space is for vehicles, and people are going through the vehicles and using the space, right? So this is a effective bit of footpath. And you see, when there's a retail on the edge, there should be at least minimum buffer from the retail, because that's where all the hanging of the retail shops will happen. People will kind of put their stuff out as well a little bit, and then the walking zone is literally kind of 1.2 meters away from the retail edge itself, and then the walking zone happens, right? So the total effective width of the footpath was only 0.5 out of the entire walking width. And what we told them was that your actual usable space for walking is much less, and everything is being devoted to cars. People have to walk through the entire nightmarish honking and everything of the cars and the rickshaws. So what we told them was, there was a larger kind of plan how to reorient the entire traffic circulation, and we were able to kind of convince them to actually increase the footpath space from 1.2, 1.5 to almost 6 meters in width, and then the carriageway for the rickshaws and everything. And that's what the entire change, if you see the right hand side image, People, this is like the COVID time when the pedestrian footfall was lesser, but right now if you go, this is very well used with the entire, very successful in terms of how people use the space itself and look at the entire thing. So we were able to convince with numbers because the data was there at this point. For some initial traffic data was provided to us, and that's how this particular project was looked at. So we call this investigative urbanism. It's the next portion where again data is not available, and then what happens, and how do you convince the clients? In this case, we were working with Srinagar, Dal Lake area. So when we were brought into this project, there were discussions in the ministry to actually look at the entire road street around Dal Lake and widening into a highway, like almost like 5 to 6 lanes of wider carriageway, because people were complaining about congestion at the Dal Lake gate, over here on the bottom corner, and this entire thing was congested with a lot of traffic. And how do you get this people from different neighborhoods of Bryan and Nishad Bagh and get people all the way to Dal Gate? So the idea was that they wanted to look at entire wide corridor, but when we came into the picture, the narration when we talked about was we went to a whole historical analysis of Dal Lake and investigative research with photographs and everything of what Dal Lake was. This is the entire from 16th, 17th century to 1940s, and if you see the center of the Dal Lake itself, amount of water kind of started receding because of the entire these greens are basically water hyacinth and everything, which kind of
and also the build. People started building houses and boat
on the edge itself.
Inside Dal, and that actually caused a lot of the water that you see from the 16th, 17th century to 1940. It became, so today Dal is actually even smaller. So they are trying to reclaim it back.
So then when we looked at the entire thing, there were also these amazing Mughal gardens, the Shalimar Bagh, the Nishad Bagh, Tulip Gardens, all on the edges, not entirely on the edges, but they had some connection, relevance with the lake itself, and that's how the whole network came about. And also the idea for these all the houseboats in the lake, right? They had their own significance. It was actually used very extensively as a way of travel within the lake, and all the water streams, everything kind of flew into the major inlets, flew into the Dal lake itself, and the connection was very ecologically as well as transport wise was very, the shikaras, what they call it over there, right? So they were easily kind of part of the larger everyday life movement system within Dal. So and then that's how the entire house, the ghats on the Dal itself, everything was part of the festivities, and everything were part of the Dal Lake environment itself. So what really happened was, over time, all of this kind of diminished, and the entire kind of mode of transport kind of shifted towards cars going in and out, right? We were taking the entire mode like that. So we did a whole count on how many vehicles are going in, how many people are actually being transferred in those vehicles, and told them that if you actually take all the people who are coming from cars and get to like these buses, this is a light rail which we propose, but also in buses, if you take them and ferry them through buses up and down, your congestion on the existing right of way will significantly reduce. And the vision that we kind of came up with was like forgetting the ideas or the current issue is, but talking about a larger kind of picture about that the Dal Lake would be one of the most significant waterfront that we'll have as in India, right? Like it's actually, they compared the Kashmir and everything almost like Switzerland, right? So what you want to tell them is we have an amazing asset which is right there, and what we want to create is not like a huge highway cutting off any access with the lake and the lake edge, but creating something which is part of the main kind of promenade system, amazing waterfront experience when you are walking along the Dal Lake itself. And then each of these large Mughal gardens actually were connected back in the days. This is Nishad Bagh, amazing kind of palace of the Nishad Bagh with terracing of these things coming down, and if you can see, people are all thriving on the edge right now in this historical image. So what we told them was this is currently kind of disconnected with all of your movement, right? So creating this entire experience, dominating it as a proper promenade and everything else, and coming and connecting. So The idea was to creating a vision which will paint a picture in the head that a highway is not a solution, which was it was not an implementation project. We were brought in specifically to kind of look at this from a different angle. Even if it was a transport-led project, we actually were able to stall the highway proposal of this 4-lane highway and trigger a larger conversation of re-envisioning of the whole Dal Lake itself. Unfortunately, with the entire government and everything shifting in the last couple, so things kind of slowed down a bit. But now again, the person who got us on board over there is working directly with the transport authority and the local government there. And this conversation again restarted about how do you look at the larger Dal Lake itself. I'll just quickly go through. There's some few slides more.
Do you want me to take up, Bhavani?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I think one of the things that you will always struggle with when you are designing, especially waterfronts and larger sort of context, is who are you designing for? Is it for tourism? Is it for the locals? Or is it the right balance that you can create between the two? Mahesh, can you go next? So this is a story of a tourism master plan that we got hired for. There were 7 islands in the Krishna River, and these are river islands. So they actually have, the first thing that we had to show them that these are islands that actually change every year because they have very dynamic edges. Now what happens is, if they have dynamic edges, you cannot concretize the edge in any way because you need that tide to happen, and you need to make sure that whatever you develop is actually away from a lot of the flooding areas and easily programmable, yet very, very sensitive to the context. So this was the master plan that we did for the 7 islands. Go next. Now I'll just show you, I think one of the questions and one of the very important parts when you are dealing with waterfront projects is that the water, consider that, or the lake body that you have in your case, consider that a very important stakeholder in your design. What that means is, do not just think of it as a dead or a non-living object. If you start considering it as a living object, you will realize that they also have seasons. They have a certain lifestyle that they support. And that's what adaptive waterfront edges were helping us do. What these meant is that you allow for access, but you do not try and control the water body. So a lot of this was about creating floodable edges that allow for people to enjoy the spaces, but also do not stop the natural systems that exist there. And what you see on the right hand side are these different edge conditions that we developed. And actually, if you just do a little bit of research, you will see that there are both natural as well as engineered ways on how you can actually have very responsive and floodable edges. And a lot of the examples in our country don't really follow those. But I think that's really important, especially when you're dealing with waterfront projects. Can you go next? So these are other edge conditions that we created. As you see, all of them are layered because we allowed for, and they all had different strategies depending on the kind of velocity that the river was flowing. And that actually helped us create different strategies for the different edges. Go next. Now, the idea here was that we will create a system where people also can enjoy and be close to nature, and where nature can thrive also. So what we actually ended up doing was, within this master plans, we were able to create almost 40 acres of constructed wetland parks. This is an image of what that park would look like. It would really be very rustic, not very built. It still would have program. We were able to create a canal district that was almost 50 acres that had gondola rides and everything that the tourism department can also create as a destination to help create a destination. But at the same time, they were all very sensitive to the context that they were there in. All the edge conditions that you see in this depict the floodable species that we can use to help maintain a very porous edge condition. Designing for the human scale. I think this is very important because a lot of the times you will see that, especially also when you draw your elevations, you will realize that when you're drawing elevations of your buildings, you might not put trees in front of it. But in urban design, we actually tell everybody to put a tree in front of their building, because that tree, especially in India, will help create the right kind of atmosphere for someone to walk. And also the kind of master plans that you do, we call them bird's eye master plans, because only birds can see that site from that angle. The actual people that will use the site will always see it from a human height. And that's something that you should always consider when you, especially when you are zooming out and creating larger master plans, that you will have to consider what are the kind of eyes that are actually going to see the street or the master plan that you create. Go next.
One more point on this proverb, eyes on street. Basically, the idea is that the more kind of engaged you are with the street, the better and safe the street is. The idea that the large compound walls and edges which are very very kind of dark, let's say, right? And people, when you walk outside, obviously when people are visually looking at it, it's already kind of so surveillance is already there, but there are people, so you don't need to put on your cameras and everything else. So that's the thing that's come out from the whole idea, that you don't need to kind of make your places safe around. You don't need to have cameras everywhere. At least just keep people themselves having normal vigilance on the streets and outside. And that actually boils down to any kind of idea of what a walkable city really means. Whether it's from the health perspective, the amount of obesity and diabetes that has increased in India. India is leading in those numbers right now, and how we really want to push for more walkable cities, not like car-driven cities. The economy of the place itself, the local shops and everything, how they kind of flourish with those local businesses when walkable cities are there. From an environment perspective and from the society perspective as well, like that's the core idea. This is a project we did in Abu Dhabi. Mazda city is like a very well-known neighborhood in Abu Dhabi. Original design was actually by Foster's, where they implemented the entire kind of a mile by mile long square. The idea was the whole thing was raised above and everything was like pedestrian on top, and the infrastructure, transit, everything was on the lower level and on the edges. But over the period of time, even that could not sustain the idea, and the initial phase was built, but we were brought in for doing the next phase of the development along with CBT architects, whom we work a lot with in Boston. And we looked at the entire one part of the master plan in phase 2 and talked about how do you increase the walkability component in the neighborhood. At the same time, make it safe, make it shade friendly, make it kind of appropriate to the environment in the heated environment in Abu Dhabi itself. So this is a very simple kind of analysis where you see left hand side is Venice, where all the streets are so narrow and you can easily maneuver through, and then the canal system, which is very famous. You have almost in a square kilometer 580 intersections. That's what we call it, because that's how each block in building, when it comes and terminates at a road, and a node is formed, which is an intersection. The next one is in LA, which is a square grid, which is 58 intersections per square kilometer. Afterwards, it's 6, which is in Irvine, USA. This is a very suburban kind of development, huge highways all around. You can't really easily walk around. You have to take out a car to go around everywhere. And the last one is what Mazda City, when we came in, was at the plan was looking at 18 intersections per square kilometer, which were basically very, very big blocks and not easy to walk across. When we came in, we basically talked about the larger blocks, how do you break them and convert them. These blue arrows in between the center are basically sitcas, which are pedestrian alleyways, and create these urban blocks which have vehicular around, but have a lot of these porous, easy to contain, kind of connect to like a very fine grained urban fabric itself. Environmental comfort also was very much an integral part of how you look at these, and we converted this portion of the almost 39 intersections in the square itself from what it was, which increased the walkability and accessibility part of the plan itself. And then talking about different ways of lifestyle of how a person who is living in the neighborhood can go from point A to point B easily, and this we call it as a day in a life kind of an idea. Whether you're working in the research and development part, in the morning you get up, have your breakfast, and then In the lunchtime, you can come down easily, walk around to the mosque, the plaza itself, and then in the evening time again, while coming back to work, and go easily through the rapid transit and go to your house itself. So the idea was to create a different user groups at different times of the day and see how easily they can walk across and go across doing the lifestyle, right? And different age groups as well. So this was very successful in showing, and all these pedestrian networks. We actually did 2 master plans. This was the previous one. Both of them won the Urban Design Awards, AI Awards, and the idea was again focused mainly on pedestrian friendly and environment friendly kind of a master plan overall. So taking that as one thing, we also got a chance to work in for a campus master plan in Rajasthan. So this was again in Jaipur, different places in Rajasthan. It's amazing, unique kind of very intrinsic fabric of walking, and the built fabric leading to waterfronts and the lakes around. The chalk is like a usual village chalk with a small kind of tree overlooking the entire thing. So when we worked on one of the projects, we actually went through looking at a different kinds of lifestyle the place had. In Rajasthan specifically, the idea of Haveli, the courtyard, being a very intrinsic part, the chai under the tree kind of an idea. All of these were like very, very localized, small, scaled down spaces, specifically because of the harsh weather and the sunny weather, kind of the entire weather there, right? So how do you kind of make it much more climate comfortable itself in terms of the environment? So there was a master plan that we worked in, a very interesting one. Mansi can elaborate more, but the idea was, the master plan looks very chaotic, as Mansi said, for an aerial bird's eye perspective, it looks a very chaotic master plan. But the idea and the ethos of what the village of Rajasthan was, and was really captured well. And then the client also was pushing us in that direction, and how that entire thing came about. Mansi, you want to just spend minutes?
Yeah, so like when you see this master plan, you'll see that, oh, the buildings are too close to each other, and is there too much clutter, because you're seeing it from a bird's eye level. Can you go next, Mahesh? But then when we started showing them what are the kind of pedestrian connections that we have, what is the open space that we have, how it is all going to be safe during the sunniest day in Jaipur, and still allow people to walk from one part of the campus to the other part of the campus without really having too much exposure in the sun. Go next. And then we just started showing them what these spaces actually look like. When you actually see, so this is the one of the larger chalks which had 50 people, which had a capacity of 100 to 180 people to gather. And then can you go next? So we call them learning chalks. This was a food chalk. So instead of making a normal canteen, we actually created a canteen that had a both indoor as well as an outdoor dhaba kind of a look. And all the program that you see down was all the program of the living area that we thought was more public and was shared, was sort of placed architecturally as like retail street. So this is what we call the eating chalk or the dining chalk. Can you go next? And then we also had these smaller courtyards. So 4 training centers shared a little chai chalk, which was designed for 40 to 60 people to come and sit together and, between their classes, come and have that, chai session outside. And all the students here were actually more than 40 years old, because it was a training center. It was not really a campus for younger students. So we did design taking that into consideration, so that we don't have too many levels, and we don't have, but you still have a very active area. Can you go next? So this is a smallest chalk, which was a chai chalk, where we had a tree in the middle, where we had little steps where people can go up and down and sit. The steps were wide enough so that it would also become a seating space. We also had areas where people could sit and have chai, and where we could have a chai vendor come and sit. Go next. And in the housing was literally designed, which was a hostel, but was not designed like a hostel, was designed like these smaller villages that come together in this street, where you would have different artisans come and show their work. one of my favorite things about this view is that person in a dhoti wearing VR glasses, because it was about training a lot of the teachers and principals of government schools to come here and get trained and get better, go back in their villages and sort of apply those teaching methods in their practice. Go next. So
I think Mansi,
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, and I think the one thing
time.
when you do design for larger thing is you have to always think about collaborations. I know you guys are just starting, but do get we can skip this.
Yeah,
right?
I think what I'm saying is we've gone through a lot of
Yeah.
maybe we can stop here and open more of a dialogue with the kids and
Yeah.
students.
So I think what we wanted to show you guys today, so these are other projects that we do where we do say that get and collaborate with other people, get stakeholders, ask questions, don't think like designers, always ask the people who are using the site, what are the kind of solutions they need. And these are just some projects that we have actually been able to do because we asked those solutions to the different people that were in that context. Yeah, Mahesh. So
yeah, there's some images at the end of some of these I told in the beginning, right?
Right. So we can just very quickly. So this is just go next.
This
So
is
these
a
are
master
just
plan, landscape master plan, overall master plan. So we did and also executed the landscape. The idea was to maintain the ethos of the entire ravine and the trees and the thing on site and create a public space, maintaining the ecology of the place itself. So this has already been executed from what we had shown the early images. Another small one of the courtyards in Lower Parel, where we actually transformed like the out behind Neighbourhoods, entire space into which could be used as an event space, lunch space for the people there itself. And I also want to show you one small snippet. It's an ongoing project. Actually, just got inaugurated last week. This is a street project that we did with Indiabulls, basically nucleus office parks. We did this project with them. They got us on board and a huge team of consultants working on an MCGM street project in Sinamati Pavanmark. This is the Tulsi Pipe Road in Lower Parel, where we actually were able to bring about a lot of change on ground. Again, analyzing the traffic numbers with pedestrian and everything else. How do we transform the entire place from the last 2 years within the pandemic time? So this is a small snippet just showing the cycle track added, places where they were just parking abuse spaces on the edges. We converted them into proper walkable spaces. This is an image where a large screen was there without anything inside. We kind of opened it up. Places which were like full with bus parking and everything else. We could transform those under flyover spaces, making into more programmable Vashnalaya. This is if you go to Lower Parel, this is one of the things you can see right now how it's done. So yeah, some of these snippets just show the transformation in the last 2 years. So yeah, I think that's the end. We won't talk more. I think we've already spent a lot of time.
yeah.
So we'd like to open a dialogue on this. Let me see.
Mahesh, maybe you can stop sharing and then we can bring everyone up. I hope we didn't put you guys to sleep early in the morning.
Ajita, are you there?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. It was wonderful going through their work, Mahesh and Mansi. Very interesting work. Definitely, we have questions from the student side as well as from the faculty side. So I think let's start with the students, right?
Yeah.
Yes, there are a few questions already there in the chat box.
Yes.
Yeah, so I would just request those students who have put the questions to just ask that question and we can, get back.
Okay, sure.
Let's start with Surya. Surya had this question, right? How to read the edges of the site with respect to the development site context. What are different ways through we can connect built and unbuilt spaces? Surya, are you there?
Surya, where are you? Wave at us if you are there somewhere inside. Okay, so we'll, so I think, Mahesh, you want to take this question?
Yeah, Surya, which year you are in? Which studio? Third year?
Oh, I can see Surya now. I think he's struggling for, maybe you can take Ajita's phone.
I think it would be, it's proving to be difficult for the students to speak from there.
Yeah.
Okay, let's, I just want to know which studio because.
Third year?
Yes.
Third year, okay. So the idea was to ask that was like normally what happens is depending on the site that you get, right? We are all kind of blocked into this whole idea of looking at the site in isolation, and when that happens is we get stuck in when you look at an architectural program, and the buyer gets stuck into this: how much setback is required, what is the thing, how is the building sited. What we normally do is even at that scale, just kind of look at the analysis of how the edges is. Like if it's site is located in an urban environment, you need to react to the different build forms which are around. If there's a street which has a retail on it, you cannot have just like a blank wall which comes down as a compound wall and not making it invert, right? If it's a urban environment, you want to make sure that people are able to kind of easily walk around the site. There are ways that you can use setback and some programmed edge on the ground floor. Typically, what we do a lot is really when you draw a plan, you should draw it very carefully with the ground floor and the public space in the frontage of the building, what we call it, and all your services and everything can go from the back. So when you always on the side, in the site is placed, even at an architectural building level, you want to ensure that there's more porosity and more visibility at the ground level, right? And that's how the interaction with the development, the overall context and the streets could happen. At the larger level, all the things that we showed, the idea of how the site drains out, in the Pyramid campus project that we talked about, that we actually were kind of come up with the whole looking at the ecology of the place and the entire thing. We didn't talk about the Baudi Mansi, where the entire idea was to come up with a step well concept in a very innovative way of program space, of program for the context, as well as something which kind of gels well with the environment of the place itself. So that's how kind of used it. And the second part of the question was the different ways through which we can connect built and unbuilt spaces. We always think that there is no solid line of a built and unbuilt. When you look at, again, the ground floor is very important when you look at that. We take that very seriously of how you actually make the landscape kind of flow easily in the ground floor public realm to the built environment, the built form itself. So how the transition happens is very crucial. It should not be like a hard stop where the site stops, the building stops, and there's a different thing happening on the outside and different thing happening in the inside. There has to be some of interacting with the edges, so you can easily get the entrances and everything seamlessly from the outdoors to the inside itself.
Yeah, I think one thing that I'll just add to that is, whenever you're designing and you're worried about the built and unbuilt, just ask yourself that when you will be walking here, what is the edge condition that you'd like to walk next to? Do you want to walk next to a stinky compound wall where people are going to spit, or do you want to walk next to maybe a green bush or a retail space, or what are the different edge conditions. And like Mahesh rightly said, the ground floor plays a crucial role in making that happen. Don't think about that, oh, this is how people who are going to come in their limousines are going to get dropped off here, and all the other poor people who are walking will come from the back. So, give everybody the equal sort of respect to enter your any building or site, and try getting as much active usage on the ground floor, so that becomes more engaging. Do not put a cafe on the 5th floor of your building because it has the best view, because the cafe works best on the ground floor, because while you're walking you'll smell the chai and you'll want to have a chai and a vada pav and then go somewhere. So think of all those things, think like human beings and not necessarily as great designers, and I think you will be able to understand site context much better. A lot of the girls, like, as for me, especially as being a woman, I always think, what are the kind of spaces I don't like to walk next to, which are the spaces I feel scared in, which are the spaces that I feel unsafe in, and I make sure that those are not the kind of spaces that I design knowingly or unknowingly, because somebody else would feel scared walking in an alleyway that you have created by mistake for security. So that, just make sure that doesn't happen. So think like human beings, and I think you will be able to understand context much better. Think, how would your dadi use that space? Will she like to climb so many steps? Will she like so many levels? So when you start thinking and wearing these different caps of different users, you will start designing buildings that are not made for the architectural section cut that looks good with a lot of levels, but you will start thinking of how users use it.
Like old people, people on wheelchair, like kids, right? Like I have 2 kids. When you actually walk with them, the simple thing, like how the step goes up and down, you're not able to have a contiguous kind of a sidewalk space when you're walking right on the streets. That plays a huge role. The amount of shade that you walk into. You yourself, when you don't have a tree on top, where there's a whole street, there's not a tree, there's a huge compound wall. It becomes very it's not a good walk into, right? Like you'll think from different angles of users and yourself as well as one of the users, right? That itself kind of transforms whether it's outside your site or whether inside your site, what kind of spaces you want to create. Whether you like huge spaces which are public space, like a daunting kind of environment, you want to create that impact of a large public space, or you want to create more intimate spaces where you can be more humanized and easy to kind of spend time in those, right? And there's different activities demand for different kind of spaces. So always think of it from that perspective as well.
Yeah, and I think one of the questions that Surya asked again was, public spaces is about experience, different volumes of spaces can be used different, achieve different quality, and how do you actually do this? And there's your answer. Start thinking like humans and think of spaces to be fun. Think of them, not as that ye photo mein bahut acha lagega, but think if you put a swing there, somebody will use it and have so much more fun in your space. Or think that if even for we think too seriously, even in our, for example, in our under flyover space, we are surprised of how the kids are using the space. We've just given them a large space with these ground markings of hopscotch and stuff. And yesterday when I went there, the kids were playing football, they were having hopscotch, they were doing all kind of things. So I think start making spaces fun. Don't make them, even adults can have fun. So like, make them so that the swings are not for just toddlers, but somebody with 1 to 30 kgs can also sit there. So design for that kind of a thing, and you will realize that public spaces will become more active if they are more inclusive of all the different kind of users that can possibly use it. So don't design a waterfront for the photograph or the camera. Design it for the people, and you will realize that your design will be so much better.
Just to add to that, another question which peeps into the same conversation with Surya had asked, how can the adjacent lake to be used to benefit of a site? So again, since it's a design studio, you should never kind of think of it as a alone single site, right? Whatever things, lakes and water bodies are amazing assets to have right next to you. The visibility, the visual corridors, the biodiversity that comes from any kind of water body adjacent to your site. Like think of that as an opening, not a back door, right? To the site itself, and whether edge needs to be a public space, it's entirely up. I have not seen the site or not seen any plan for what you're asking for, but generally what I'm saying is don't think of it as a disconnected thing. It should be part of an asset that the site should embrace easily, and that should be the way of kind of communication with the water body or any other kind of asset that is there, open spaces on around the site itself.
Perfect. So we've answered.
So in this respect, may I add something, Mahesh and
please.
Mansi?
Yeah.
Yes,
So with in extension to this particular question, so between the lake and the site that is given to them, there is a vehicular road, existing vehicular road, all right, and there is parking and stuff like that. What we realize as faculty in the design studio is that despite indirectly and subtly prodding them, the students are a little afraid they have the doubts whether they can change the existing outside conditions of the site. Okay, so what do you think? Should they be afraid of making changes in the outside, or they should not?
Never. Your students, if you start being afraid, we are going to the dumps in this country, because when we first walked SBM, the before after photographs, nobody believed us that there is space for cycling, there's space for people to walk, that there is you
For the
always
greens that come along with it, everything seemed like a uphill task and challenge, right? And
yeah,
there
and
are thousands of stakeholders, the traffic police, the BST, you name them, right? It's a huge public activity. In a private realm, it's at this level, I think you should be fearless. Like think about connections going on top like of the road. You don't care. Like you don't have anybody asking you questions, right?
yeah, you are
Those could be answered.
have fun, figure out new ways of connecting that designers have not figured out yet. Please don't make people go underground, very unsafe. Don't make underpasses. Keep people on ground and figure out a way where everybody shares the same plain land. Don't make people go up and down, but just figure that out and try and experiment. Come up with ways where that road, can that be diverted, or how can that road still function and yet have enough crossings so that anybody can access the lakefront. Then start discussing what should be the lakefront of the kind of build that comes there, not now but maybe 20 years from now. Put in that idea that today I'm doing an intervention that's away from the lake, but what that intervention will do is trigger the development on the lakefront. And what does that look like? So I think the one thing I always tell, like we have realized that ultimately everybody needs a lot of, anybody who's doing urban intervention, we need to be the optimists in the group, because everybody else will constantly be doubting. And what we need to do is have a dialogue and come up with the right balance to make sure that a vision is set. If you don't have a vision, then ye sab chote chote problems will trouble you. So you have to decide, what is your vision? Do you want to connect to the water? What is the kind of space you want? Who do you want to connect it for? And then figure out ways of doing that. But don't be scared. As students, though, you should have fun. Just like we still have fun and freak out people, and then they're like, nahi jada ho gaya, thoda kam karo, because and that's fine, because if you already show a 10% of your design, then by the time it's actually built, it will become minus 10%. So always show 150% of the design so that you build at least 80-90%. So really go all out.
Correct. Dunia badal dalo.
Yeah, of course, because see, look at the condition that you guys, in general, wherever you live in India right now, look at the condition that we are in. You don't need just one designer to change one street. We need thousands, millions of designers to change every street, every corner, every building edge, to make sure that we are, like the amazing space or people that we are, we deserve that kind of space. So if we start being scared कि ऊपर ये कैसे होगा, everything can happen. You need the right dialogue and you need the right vision. So don't be scared to do either.
And one thing I would also encourage, I know in the student life, you don't have access to all kind of different disciplines that you would interact in normal life, right? Like a real project will have engineers on board, like transport people on board, like everybody other than architecture discipline will be interacting with you, and you're only holding the design end, right, with the client. But the point is, if you have like just talk with your folks, talk with anybody who is from other your friends, non-architect friends as well. Just talk about it's not that I'm doing my design in my cocoon, right? You have to think of and of different perspectives, don different hats, and speak with variety of people to understand what are the things that you're trying to resolve. And automatically, when you start questioning in that direction, things start falling in place. Okay, this is what will happen when you have to interact with or where you have to interface with any kind of like, for example, simple thing is drainage, right? And services that need to come into. The moment you interact with the engineer who wants to put an STP, they will place at the most convenient location at the corner of a site on the lakefront side. For example, I'm just giving a wild example. And when you are talking about how the connection would happen, you want like public space on the most important frontage of the building, right? So think of it from different perspectives, that how would you interact the build form and the people who are using it, and trying to create a space which is visually appealing, at the same time very easy to kind of maneuver with, right? And all the services and everything can be taken care of in a way that you logistically move them around and have those conversations with different people at different time. I'm sure you also have like studios with structures and other things, other professors in the school as well, right? So take the design discussion to those studios as well, those discussions, and with your structures professor, with your landscape design professor, with your any other kind of thing which is happening, engineering and everything, right? So all those different classes that you're taking outside the design studio, you should be able to have an interaction and dialogue with those as well regarding your design, because design is not done in isolation ever, right? This is the only time in the studio that you'll be doing as a designer. Once you go out in the real world, everything is a discussion with the non-designer, which is something which you, after gaining your perspective, you have to be able to communicate that that front. Okay. There's one question. We are supposed to use 30% as a build-up. In which way we can use the remaining area in a more engaging manner for the community?
You tell us. We can't tell you. You tell us. It really depends on what your design is. There are 1,000 ways to use it. You tell us how you want to use the other 70% of the site. Any other question, guys? I think we are on time. I think we had kept it till 12. So we are running good with time.
Good morning. I have a question, like how do you specifically choose the colors with respect to user and site context? As I have previously also gone through your Instagram page where I could see the different spaces comes with different colors. So how do you pick up the specific colors, and why is it so in that specific zone context?
Yeah. So I think colors is a very important strategy in urban realm, and colors can actually be brought from different parts. So color can be brought through landscape. In one of our retail street, we've actually planted these trees that actually will turn pink once a year for 2 weeks. And that will help, that color of the trees will help give identity to that retail street. So, you know, that's one way of giving color. So you put the same kind of trees there so that once a year when it completely turns pink, everybody would like to go there, and that becomes an identity as, you know, the street that turns pink. The other place is where you can use color. So for example, in our SB Mark project, we actually got the color through multiple people, but it actually came from the artwork. We actually collaborated with ST Plus Art, And when we told them that we would like to create the underflyover artwork that is actually telling the story of Parel, to use a single tone of color and not too many colors, so that it does not distract away from the story that you are trying to tell. They came up with this really dark blue because it is easy to maintain, and also it is not black. Initially, the idea was that it would be black, but actually ST Plus Art suggested that it becomes dark blue so that it remains not patchy. And then that color became something that helped give us certain highlights to the other parts of the streetscape. And that's the color that so that's one way of using color. In the other street that we have been working on, since you mentioned the Instagram page, we have the Worli Connect project that we haven't shown here. There, the idea of the color was that it is supposed to identify there are multiple pedestrian lanes, and we were trying to create one color that you can see from far away and that you will know is the same connection that you have come, so that you know that it takes you to the water. And even the artwork there is talking about the waterfront of Worli and the story of the coolies in that area. So that's how that color came about. So the blue was because of the ocean there. So color is very important, and again, it comes from context. It's not necessarily, and sometimes it comes through different people. Like in our SB Mark, it came from the artists. So that's how we have been dealing with color. But I genuinely would suggest that think of landscape not as just this paper where you make curvy drawings and fill it up with different shades of green. Actually think of landscape as elements that define which are the fruiting alleys, which are the alleyways where the leaves will fall down, and that will create an effect. So think of all those natural colors that also exist. Any other question? I think we have time for one more question. So,
good afternoon, ma'am.
Hi.
Ma'am, I wanted to ask, you have done many wonderful urban designing program as well. So, if it's possible, it would be really helpful if you will show us some examples and explain through it.
अरे तुम सो रहा था क्या? अभी कुछ दिखाए? Good morning. Array, so I think here's the key. What we tried to show you,
urban design, the open space between built area, how to treat them.
So that's what we were trying to show, that there is no right formula. If you saw in Medellin, they treated it because people needed connection, right, to go up the hill. If you see in Piramal, we had the open spaces that we treated as walking alleyways and we put retail around it. If you see in Mahalunge, we had open spaces and the unbuilt spaces that were connecting the built and the riverfront, and we made them into these pocket areas full of full of trees, but these pocket zones that were recreational, passive and active. If you see in the other project, or Konsa Mazdar, the open spaces became these transportation alleyways that also had these small programs. So there is no right way of an urban design is about creating the right program that will help you make those unbuilt spaces not something away from the build. It is actually completely integrated, and you won't even realize that when you have shifted from the building into a non-building space programmatically. And that's what you should concentrate on. Don't try to create a separate कि मेरे ग्राउंड फ्लोर में तो सर्कल्स हो रहे हैं और बाहर गए तो हम triangles हो रहे हैं. So don't get into that conversation. Get into the conversation of what is happening inside and how does that program come out and what is the kind of edge condition you need.
Also the kind of programming with the users, right? Like if you have a residential area around, buildings around which are fronting an unbuilt space which you want to make into a courtyard. So what kind of uses will be there in those, right? And whether it's a small kind of a court or a basketball court or a children's play area or whatever that is, right? So in terms of a user who are using it, what are the age groups that are using it, and how can you make that space? Sometimes it's a flexible space, which is basically what we're talking about. Like it's just a shaded space on either side with just a floor marking with turf courts, right? Where people use it and their own ways and adapt to it and make it their own. Whether it's a farmer's market could come in and place there, or sometimes a kabaddi match happens. Sometimes cricket can be played, a box cricket can be played. Anything can happen in those flexible spaces. But again, depending on the buildings around and the users that are using those space. In one of the projects, and again in Mazda also, we even in R&D, the research and development office buildings all around, we had places where people can come in, office goers can come in the breaks and just have lunch in that space, or they can just a table tennis was kept there, and you can just have a lunch break with a match of table tennis in between, right? So that the idea is how do you cater to different age groups, user groups, and create those adjacent spaces, whether it's a pocket park or a big public space at that, right? So
yeah, and I think one thing that will help you is if you're creating a housing, think about the people who are living there. What do they need? If you're creating a commercial usage, then think about how will the people coming to office use it. If you're creating a hospital, think how can the unbuilt spaces help people coming or getting treated in the hospital. If you're creating, so I think the kind of program you have inside the building will actually influence the program that you have outside the building. If you're creating a restaurant or a sports area, then think about what is the kind of frontage that needs. So I don't think there's one answer. Each of you should have your own answer to what is it that you are doing with the unbuilt spaces in your sort of projects, and why those spaces are there is going to be heavily dependent on what you build there. And that's why we say that the ground floor is very, very important. I hope, does that answer your question? Oh, it's really tough, yeah, to do this online thing. It is tough. We'll try next time to come and visit you guys so that we can, look you in the eye and make you answer back.
yeah.
Yes.
So any other?
May I?
Yeah.
Yeah, may I ask? So, so you have been talking about landscape urbanism. That's evident also from your website, and that's really an interesting concept. Obviously very, very relevant for urban designers. But in college, many times we have been talking about that how such a concept can also be made applicable, for architectural design projects at the site planning level. Okay, so would you like to kind of say something about what landscape urbanism is? Because I think that the third year students are still not exposed to that idea. The senior students are. But here again, considering that the students here are undergrad architecture students, how we can make such a concept relevant, for architectural design, site planning ideas, if you would like to say a few things.
So the idea of landscape urbanism is something which for us also in a lot of Indian projects that we're looking at goes beyond scales. It's not like the idea of landscape itself also on the outdoors, right? It's we have been talking about how do you get those inside the build form and talk about the integration. That's the key, how built and the unbuilt integrates with each other. So the larger scale, when it happens, when she showed in some of the projects of the master plans and the riverfront and how the entire biodiversity worked. So you look at that scale of a human being placed in a larger kind of ecosystem and different kind of stakeholders. In this case, the whole biodiversity, whether it's plants, shrubs, animals, birds, everything, all kind of species kind of interacting in that environment, and how that kind of relates to when you go into the buildings of the architecture and the entrances. how the entire kind of experience goes all the way down to the balconies and terraces of that building itself, right? So biodiversity is not limited to the riverfront there, but if you have the birds flying and moving out there, the same bird will, the small little sparrow will come in onto your balcony and terrace and kind of be there as part of your ecosystem itself, right? So at that scale, it transcends into different user groups. Same thing with people also, right? So people also, when you talk about a larger kind of a system of landscape, how does the experience goes from when you're walking out on a riverfront to a street to a building to using that space itself. It's not no longer a thick line that kind of separates out the user from this is my space, this is my street, this is my building, this is my step where it ends. The experience transcends into from wherever you are in that kind of space. They're the same thing, the music of the water, whether it's in the landscape or inside the building foyer or whatever it is, it constantly reminds you of a larger story that is being told, right? Whether it's again, as I talked about, the bird species and everything, or the experiential part of a person itself. The sounds, the smell, the senses, different things which you can think of are part of that entire thing. Then also comes down to the whole materiality of the architecture also, right? Whether the same thing when you're doing on the landscape front, what kind of material you use, whether it's a natural stone or whether it's like just plain plastic cement, or whether it's the plastic cement that is then artwork, whether it's color, all of those things start exciting you visually, aesthetically, smell-wise, sensorial kind of an idea of how you experience a space. So for us, landscape urbanism, when we started, it was as an idea, when we talked about as an idea, it always kind of helped us in talking about urban design beyond just planning and putting these verticals. It was always like a seamless joining factor throughout all of these public realm to private realm and the built itself. So that's how we are looking at it and positioning it right now. Want to add anything?
Yeah, that's...
No, I think you've covered it. I think a simple way is, I think in 3 years, you've started to learn how to make a plan, right? And in your plan, each of your line corresponds to the door, the window. So don't think as your site as something away from that. So those lines should actually extend outwards all the way, or vice versa. If you draw the outside lines first, extend them inwards into your plan, just as a start exercise to see what happens. You know, a lot of the times when I've seen town master plans of third years, the road is doing its own funky thing and the building is rectangular. So, you know, why? So I think you have to try and get the same extensions, and that synergy needs to be very seamless. So don't make your building stand out, and don't make your landscape stand out. Let them be one. Like, let them almost integrate and become the same experience. That's what Mahesh is saying. So just like you started drawing plans that talk about spaces going up and how do you use the staircase, the same thing comes out at a site level also. So your road is not an alien. Your road is part of your ground floor plan. So, okay, guys, sorry, we have to rush. We actually have a meeting at 12:10. So, is this okay? All right. Thank you so much. And thank you for listening to us. And we hope to connect with you guys soon.
Thank you so much. On behalf of everyone here at PICA and Ajita, Tushara, Rupali, etc., have been interacting with you, and they are instrumental in getting you to this space here. Let it be a hybrid and online space, but I think a dialogue has begun between you and us. It's been quite stimulating to get a glimpse of your work, and it's been wonderful.
Thank you.
Really hoping that
I'm from DY Patil. That's where I did my undergrad. So I know New Bombay well, and PICA, DIPCA, and BVCOA were like gang.
Okay.
So,
right.
So I think we'd love to connect with you guys. Do let us know if you ever need any help or would like to connect with us. And yeah, we'll keep the dialogue going.
Yeah.
Certainly. Certainly. Thank you so much for being with us and, chatting with our students.
Thank you.
See you very soon. Thank you everyone for joining in.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Mansi, and thank you, Mahesh.
Thanks, Ajita. Bye.
Bye.